Kia ora. Hey, it's Mona here from the Humans Connecting team. Our podcast is all about soothing, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you to become a connected human. The content of our podcast is of a general nature, and consuming this content is not the same as seeking individual advice from a connection mentor, registered mental health professional, or coach. Conversations about human connection address loneliness. We destigmatize loneliness here at Humans Connecting. We do that by talking about loneliness openly. Loneliness conversations necessarily include a range of topics which at times may be difficult for us to talk about, to hear, and to sit with. If throughout our conversation this is true for you, we encourage you to please contact a mental health hotline. The link in the episode description can help you find some immediate support for many places you may be in the world. Our advice to you is this: meet yourself where you are and how you are right now. If you don't feel up to it, we'll be right here ready to be by your side when you're ready. We're glad you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, it's Phil. Welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast. How are you today? I am just so thrilled that you've decided to press play on this episode of the Humans Connecting podcast because, well, the topic that we're talking about today is friendship. And it's a topic that comes up all the time in lots of different ways and lots of different statements and questions, but generally around the fact that it can be really tough to make friends when we're adults and maintain friendships as we're adults. So we've listened to your questions, we've listened to the comments that you have given us, and we have called in a global expert on friendships, Dr. Miriam Kirmayer from Montreal in Canada. And before Dr. Miriam joins us for a fantastic chat that I can't wait for you to join, I want to say hi. And again, thank you so much for joining us and deciding to press play on this episode, because we know that there's a lot of things that you could be doing with your time right now. But how awesome are you that you've decided to press play on something that, like on a topic on a podcast, or here on YouTube on something that is pretty, well, you know it's important, but it's kind of a bit scary as well. So we just want to say hi, recognizing your courage and your awesomeness. In case we've not met before, I'm Phil McAuliffe and I'm the founder of Humans Connecting. And Humans Connecting is based over at humansconnecting.org. And we are all about destigmatizing loneliness and helping humans, including you, to get the connection that you need and that you absolutely deserve. And we do all of that by talking openly about loneliness. We talk about, the things that in life lead us as humans, as the weird and wonderful, awesome humans that you and I each are, to get the connection that you and I need, how to recognize the connection that we need, to talk about it, to have those kind of tough conversations that we might not really know how to have. We have them here, and we give you the encouragement to go and have them in your life. So that's what this podcast is all about. And again, if you want to find out more about what we do, go over to humansconnecting.org, and there's all kinds of stuff, products, services, all designed to help you become a more connected human. Now, to Dr. Miriam Kirmayer, I kind of was really fanboying over Dr. Miriam initially. You'll hear in this conversation, we'd kind of been interacting with each other on social media, and we'd had a few chats over Zoom, and we just kind of got along like a house on fire. I really respect her work. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Miriam's work, well, she is a clinical psychologist. She's a leading friendship expert, and she's one of the most influential speakers on human connection and social support. And with over a decade of research on the science of friendship, which she'll explain in just a few minutes, Dr. Miriam is absolutely revolutionizing the way that we show up for, encourage, and connect with each other. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Miriam's work, you've got to be familiar in really short order. But she has done work with companies like Bumble, Disney, Bell Telecommunications in Canada. She's done work with the Canadian government. She's just kind of like, she's the real thing. And I'm so excited for you to join us for this conversation. Dr. Miriam Kirmayer, welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we've made this happen.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I am really just excited to have this chat with you and for the listener and viewer to join us for this, because it's not a small topic that we're going to be talking about, like the whole like friendship caper. And no pressure, but I have high expectations that you'll be able to solve this for everybody in this episode. So are you up for it?
Wouldn't that be nice? I hope to do my best to answer your questions and obviously the listeners' questions about this topic that can be quite mysterious. We don't typically talk all that openly about friendships, do we?
No, we know when they're not going well. And I think we know innately how important they are and how they can make us feel, but they're kind of mysterious about how they kind of form, right? But we'll get into all of that. Like, listen, like this is going to be great. We're like jumping straight in right from the get-go. But I just want to say it's fantastic that you're here. And for those for the audience who didn't listen to the intro, like, would you care to please introduce yourself and how you came to be like this friendship expert sitting in Montreal on the other side of this Zoom call?
Yes. Well, thank you for that. Oh, it's a good question. And, my answer to this has changed over the years. It's very easy for me to share a little bit about my professional background here. So I trained as a clinical psychologist, and my interest in friendship, at least professionally, really started partly from the clinical work that I was doing, where I was working with children and families. And there was a very explicit emphasis on helping kids to develop social skills and build healthy friendships. And then clinically, I became really interested in working with young adults and adults. And all of a sudden, there was a total lack of both research and support available to help us all build and sustain healthy friendships the older we get. And that was really interesting and concerning to me. And the research piece in particular was something that I became really fascinated with and wanted to better understand not only the importance of these relationships, as you've suggested. I think intuitively we have a sense that these are helpful and valuable connections, but to really understand the how do we actually meet and make new friends as adults? How do we end our friendships when they have run their course? How do we know when to let go of a friendship? How do we negotiate conflict? Again, there's just so much information and practical guidance out there about navigating romantic relationships. And there was a real dearth when it came to platonic connections. And so that was a big part of what motivated me to start answering these questions empirically and to share that. But looking back, I'm also very aware of a lot of the personal experiences that I've had that have kind of encouraged me to go down this road, just thinking about how meaningful my own friendships have been at both very challenging times in my life and at really exciting opportunities and moments, and some of the pain that I've, of course, myself have experienced in terms of seeing connections run their course.
Yeah. You've just like opened up a like a rabbit hole that I'm seeing here that I've just made a note of. And so I'm sharing this with you, Miriam, and with you, viewer and listener. I've just written down the words letting go. And I want to say that out loud in the hope that I don't forget this, because that's something I really want to explore in the conversation. But one of the things, thank you so much for that intro. One of the things all the way through the first season in speaking with guests, and you as the first guest on the second season of the podcast, one of the things, the real themes that's really come out from people who are working in essentially like human connection and the many different variations that we humans do to connection, whether it's that's like in research, in that academic, whether they're clinical psychologists, whether they're coaches, whether they're I don't know, humans all. One of the things that's led us here to do this work is following the curiosity. And you didn't say that, but that was really strong. And listener on listening on a podcast, Miriam is nodding. She's doing full body nods in that one. But yeah, it's really powerful. It's really powerful. And seeing that your word was, there was a dearth of information, of resources, of study, I'd imagine, in the importance of friendships for adults. Like there was a certain point in life where we're like, you've got that skill.
Yes,
everyone just knows this
exactly.
now.
Exactly.
But we don't.
No, we don't. And exactly what you just said was the theme that I kept hearing in my one-on-one work with clients, which was I don't know what to do here. I don't know where to go to meet new people. I don't know how to network or socialize with confidence. I don't know when to let go of this friendship. And yet the world expects me to know, or I feel as though I believe that the world expects me to, and the difficulty is that therefore moment becomes a moment of personalization and internalization. Well, if I'm expected to know this and I don't, if the whole world assumes that I have this figured out, and yet here I am feeling like I don't, what does that say? And very often what we do with that moment of uncertainty is we personalize it. What does that say? Well, it says something about me and my confidence and my capacity and my competence and my worth. And so there's this I don't need to tell this to you, or I imagine the people who are listening to our conversation right now, there's this very close connection between those moments of struggle, those moments of loneliness, of isolation perhaps, or disconnect, and the experience of shame, and the experience of anxiety, and the experience of sadness. And so it just ended up being very overwhelming for a lot of people. And what became clear to me as I kind of dove into this work was that there really is this vicious cycle where when you are feeling disconnected, lonely, and you personalize that, and those feelings of shame or guilt or anxiety build, well, most of us tend to react to that by withdrawing. We react in ways that take us further away from that fundamental need. And so I have really worked through this in my own life, of course, but I've also really tried to shift the conversation toward, well, how do we get caught up in a much more positive cycle where we feel as though we have the competence and capacity to invest in these connections, where we're able to benefit from them, and then when we're able to just really experience firsthand how powerful they can be and get swept up in that in a really meaningful way.
It's really strong. And what that cycle that you're describing there for me and us here at Humans Connecting, we call that's the downward spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's so true. It's so true because it can make us feel pretty wretched, like having that our worthiness for love and belonging questioned. And that's not a comfortable experience. And yeah, as you've said, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I think we can all imagine this, and we've all sort of going to places right now, as you've said, Miriam, where this has happened in our own lives, not just looking at it from, a potentially clinical perspective or an academic perspective, or, talking about it as a concept. This is something that we all deeply feel, and it's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. And in many ways, that downward spiral is something that is really familiar, but also really hard to arrest. Because as you keep on, like it just sort of builds up its own momentum, and the further and further you go, and to stop the slide takes effort, let alone the feeling of crawling back up that spiral. But feel right now, it's important just to say that while these kind of circumstances really do make us question our worthiness for love and belonging, and we're all familiar with this, I just want to say right now, like, we are all fundamentally worthy of love and belonging. Even though we question it and we might really believe that we're unworthy of it, like, that's not true. That's not true. Even though we could see signs and feel all the feelings and, feel intuitively within our bones, all of that kind of stuff, that we're not unworthy of it. It's crap. You are worthy of love and belonging right now, just as you are. So that can kind of help get us to the neutral place, where we can ascend the spiral, as opposed to, like, feeling like we have to crawl up the spiral that we've just descended down. There's a whole lot of imagery there, but I just really want to say, I really want to underline it, underscore it, bold it, italicize it, highlight it, do all the things that we can do in Microsoft Word to make something really stand out. You are worthy of love and belonging right now, just as you are.
I love how you've put that. I co-sign that that message. The thing that I often come back to, and that I like to repeat as much as I can, is a version of this: of you are worthy of meaningful connections, and meaningful connections are worth the effort. It doesn't mean that, as you said, ascending that spiral is easy or easeful or comfortable even. It certainly takes a lot of work, internally and practically, and yet it is so worth it. And I just really love how you put that. So thank you for sharing that message.
No, not at all. And I just feel here that like, it is absolutely worth it, because and I'll say this before asking my next question. One of the things when we're in the depths of a loneliness experience, and we're going through those thoughts and those feelings that are really uncomfortable, and doing something about it, like we're already feeling uncomfortable, and yet doing something about it is more uncomfortable. So we stay where we are in the sort of comfortable misery of where we are, rather than like risking further discomfort. But the way to connection is through that discomfort. But one of the things there is the effort that it can really feel like it takes. It's like, oh, I hate being on the couch. But it's such an effort to get off the couch. I hate being on my phone scrolling through social media for hours at a time. It feels like such an effort to open the app that turns the phone into a telephonic device. That means that people can actually hear my voice in real time, and I can hear their voice in real time. It feels like such an effort. And one of the things that I can say here in as a way to support, like, we're all familiar with this effort. We're all familiar with the effort that it requires. And there's many times that I still succumb to, like, you know what, I'm just going to sit on the couch,
Yeah.
and stuff.
Well, one of the
But
things
it,
I can say about this that might be a little bit helpful for people to hear, and I think again it's one of those helpful reminders that we all need is yes, maintaining and building and navigating connections is effortful, and yet the anticipatory effort often outweighs the actual effort involved. We feel as though there is a mountain to climb, and that picking up the phone and calling someone, or putting yourself in a new social situation where you don't know anyone, or reaching out to an old friend in some way, that will take effort, and it does, but not as much as we expect or anticipate. And so one of my favorite strategies that I often like to encourage people to practice is to be curious and start to do this game almost of, well, how much effort do I think this will really take? See if you can motivate yourself to do the action through curiosity, and then go back and ask yourself, well, how much effort did that really take? And was it as draining, exhausting, overwhelming, anxiety producing as I imagined it would be? And very often the answer is not. And if you can do that time and time again, you can shift your ways of thinking about the effort involved in, again, navigating relationships. So if anyone is listening to this while sitting on their couch comfortably with a blanket and wondering, well, what is my next step? And do I have enough energy right now to take that step? This might be a strategy for you.
That is awesome. I have just made a note of that. And I have a feeling that that could make like social media highlight reels, because it is essentially gamifying, and, you know, and matching the being curious and gamifying. That's awesome. Thank you, Miriam.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So this is a big question, and I'm curious to know where you and it's like, I think we're all familiar with how podcasts work, and so we're here to tackle the big topics, but how important to humans are friendships?
Fundamentally so. And I obviously have a bit of a bias here, as as do you, as do the people listening to our conversation. And yet this is a perspective that every bit of research that is coming out on the topic supports. We are very quick to see our relationships and friendships in particular as a nicety. There are all sorts of reasons why, but to a large extent, we tend to place more value on other types of relationships, on romantic relationships, on familial relationships, which of course are hugely important and help us to meet our sense of connectedness and our need for belonging. And yet there is something unique about our friendships. And one of the big things that separates our friendships from our other relationships that we have is the fact that they are voluntary, that we choose who we are friends with, we choose who we stay friends with. And unlike other relationships that we have with our family members, to some extent with our partners, certainly with our coworkers, where we don't have as much choice, it is that element of choice that makes our friendships so powerful in terms of our, again, sense of connectedness and belonging. And so psychologically, that's certainly a little bit of what's at play. And then there's all sorts of other things that are going on there in terms of the support that our friends add to our lives, that they tend to be the people that we go to for emotional support, for practical advice and guidance, for different types of intimacy as well. And so I like to think of it as a healthy social life involves different types of relationships, what we call relational diversity. And so this isn't to say that friendships are more important than other types of relationships, but they certainly are equally important. And many of us don't treat them in that way. And I do see that discourse changing thanks to the work of some other people working alongside me in this space, which I'm encouraged by. And to answer your question more specifically, why are they so important and what are the ways that they benefit us? Well, pick any single area of your life, and there is a study essentially that will tell you that friendships support that. When we look at physical health, feeling connected to people around us, especially our friends, is one of the most powerful predictors of how healthy we are and how long we live. If we look at mental health and emotional well-being, we know that having good, close, supportive friends protects us from developing or experiencing symptoms of psychological distress, anxiety, depression, substance use or abuse. It also helps us to cope when we are already struggling. And the area that I'm really interested in lately as well is professional development. We see that having friends at work, having mentors, having managers that we trust, that we can turn to, that we have a true relationship with, that those platonic connections are, again, one of the most powerful predictors of how engaged we are, how productive we are, how likely we are to be promoted. It reduces the number of sick days that we take. So it's just so fascinating because you can really almost pull something out of a hat. And there's a study out there that shows that, yes, friendships play a huge part in health, happiness, and success in this domain.
Yeah. I am just sort of, as you're saying there, like it feels like a self-evident truth, like friendship is important. And one thing there is, and I'm sure you've got examples of this too, Miriam, but and you might not call it by this by this term, but certainly in my previous career in the Australian public service, like there were some days and some jobs which were just tremendously shit. Like they were horrible. Like they were horrible days, and you just felt like you were thrown into a pool full of piranhas, and then you managed to get yourself out of there, and then you fell into another pool full of crocodiles, and stuff. And it was your friends who got you through. And there was, you may or may not be familiar with this term, but there's the work wife and the work husband. And those people who you just know, and I'm thinking particularly of work wives and work husbands throughout my career, that when you can just go in, you can close the door to the office and have your back to everyone else, and just like going, what the is actually happening today? Can I just have a moment? And you knew that it wasn't going to go any further than that office, and they were just going to say nice, calm, supportive things and go get back out there, go do your job.
Or not so calm things.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my God, it is terrible, isn't it? But then also that they knew that your office was that safe space as well, where they could come in and stuff. And it was because of, your work spouses that that was actually, that got you through some really terrible, got me through, I'll own that, got me through some really terrible, really tough times when it was just sort of like these overwhelming days. That there is research to begin backing that up, I think is amazing.
The importance of connections. I mean, you mentioned work wife, work husband. There's also this new term that I've come across recently, friendters, which is kind of that hybrid between a mentor and a friend. And so dual relationships can be tricky. I'm often asked questions about, under the umbrella of, should you have friends at work? Can you be friends with a superior, with a manager? Should you be? That's a bit of a nuanced conversation in terms of the boundaries that may need to exist in those relationships and the specifics of that. But this question of, do I benefit from having friends at work? Should I put in the time and the effort into building those relationships at work? The answer is absolutely yes. This isn't necessarily always a possibility for people, or I should say there are at least barriers. You will not connect with everyone. Not everyone is a potential friend, and that's okay. So it, again, does involve a little bit of thoughtfulness, sometimes creativity, in terms of where can I meet these friendters, these work spouses, these connections professionally. That might be on your team, that might be at work. That might mean joining some type of professional association where you can connect with others. I find that to be especially important for people who are solopreneurs and who don't have that built-in team or system around them, where interacting with people, real people off of a screen isn't the norm. And I think that it is becoming the norm for a lot of people to interact with people through a screen, which is great for all sorts of reasons and not so great when it comes to our need for connection. So we do need to be a little bit creative, savvy, and intentional about carving out time and space for those connections.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm going to share here, like, like there is an ironic, and you and I, Miriam, we've talked about this before, but there's an ironic loneliness to working on loneliness. And many of the people who are in my day are through Skype. I'm in Canberra, like love living in Canberra, but there's not too many people doing what I do in Canberra. They're in Sydney, they're in Melbourne, they're in Brisbane, they're in Toronto, they're in Vancouver, they're in Washington, they're in Montreal. They're in they're in France, they're in they're in a lot of places that aren't where I am right now. And I can really attest to like it is really important to have people in your day who you can kind of have that kind of shorthand conversation with. But as Professor Hugh McKay here in Australia is saying, we actually need the eye contact in our days as well, not just through the screen, but we need people to look us in the eye and we need to look them in the eye. And I find that a really simple way of explaining how we get that kind of connection. But, honestly, it's tough. It's really tough when, my colleagues, like within the team here in Humans Connecting, there's Jeff, who is my partner. And he's on the Humans Connecting team, but the team's in Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane and in New Zealand and stuff. So I still struggle with having face-to-face eye contact connection in my day, even though many days of a week I am on Skype, on Zoom, having these cracking conversations for the podcast and outside of the podcast with people who are, deeply committed to helping humans connect. But it's hard. Yeah. It's really hard.
There's a difference, but certainly between talking about connection and feeling connected, and whether you are working in this field or not. I think people can relate to that on some level, that there are certainly moments in all of our days where we almost have this performative aspect to our connection, where we are either talking about it outright or interacting with people around us, but the quality or the depth of those interactions aren't fueling us in the way that we really need to be fueled. And some of those moments are like little connection snacks, right? It's a little boost. It helps us get a little bit of that in the same way grabbing a whatever it is, bag of trail mix would help throughout the day. And some of those are not even snacks. We can leave those micro interactions or even those lengthy conversations feeling less connected than we did before, because they are draining in some way, because we have had too much screen time and our brains and eyes just cannot take that anymore. And we need to move because we've been interacting with somebody where we don't feel as though we're being our true selves. And putting on that kind of a mask is exhausting for everyone. Yeah. So it is an interesting question to reflect on of what is the difference for me personally between talking about connection or performative connection and those true moments of connection.
Yeah, and I feel that's something that is that applies in workplaces as well. Certainly in my workplace is that what was the expression? Performative connection, and where those interactions with other humans leave you feeling more or less connected, more disconnected than when you started. And there's all sorts of slang terms for those kind of interactions, energy vampires and all that kind of stuff. And certainly in some of my workplaces, they've been highly political. And there's been an element of distrust, and you had to actually be on guard.
Mm-hmm.
And information was currency, and if those who had the information, they were in the know, and they got access to all the things that you wanted. And if you had information, you had to be really careful with who you share. I mean, it's like there's a very good reason why there's so many sitcoms in workplaces, but it is a really good kind of example that we can all really kind of, or many of us can really relate to, is that we have to be on guard, and we have to have our masks on to connect with others in a way that protects us. But then at some point, we actually do need to take the masks off and allow
Exactly.
what's the connection is there to actually sink in.
Exactly.
And I feel that's the trick. That's the challenge.
Isn't it? And isn't that why that work spouse relationship is so powerful? Because that is a moment where you can walk into each other's office, shut the door, and take off the mask. And let's be real for a second. And let me just share what's on my mind, what I'm feeling, my perspective of what just happened in a less filtered way. And that's not to, authenticity is so important in connections and in friendships. But to your point, social norms are necessary, right? And boundaries are necessary. This isn't to advocate always having no filter, but how are you going about finding those people where you can let down your guard, take off the mask, be a little less filtered, and be your authentic self in that moment? Yeah.
Before I ask the next question, I just wanted to share an observation. Often in our work here, and hi, I'm like an Olympic level mask wearer. And this wearing of masks, like the wearing of masks is something that is incredibly common. It's sometimes, like quite complicated and stuff while we do it, but essentially it's to protect ourselves. And for me, and my sort of descent into loneliness was that, I wore a mask and I didn't know who or what was behind the mask. And one of the hardest things to do was to not only take the mask off in front of other people, but to allow the mask off and sit with what was there myself. And I just wanted to say that in like, as we were talking about masks and having those places and spaces where and with people with whom we can take off that mask, please, can one of those people on that list, that very privileged VIP access list, can that please also be you?
Yeah.
Because that's really important, and that sounds like hippie and new age and all of that kind of stuff, but it is so important, and it goes to, the first pillar here is connection to self. And that's just so tremendously important. If you can't take the mask off when you're by yourself, that could be a really good place to start as well. So
thank you for sharing that.
No, and you're welcome. One of the things, I'll just say this before I move on as well, but one of the things in these kind of conversations and in this work that we do from our different perspectives, Miriam, is that it's more comfortable. It's not to say comfortable, but it's more comfortable to talk about the concept. And we can all kind of see ourselves in the concept, but we also relate to the stories. And so I say that the concept is a conversation in the third person, but we connect when we share stories in the first person. And it takes courage, it takes all sorts of things, but I do know from my own experience how much I benefited from someone going, yeah, you know what, that's me too. I'm like, oh, great. Yeah. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. So yeah, that's just something that I know is phenomenally powerful. And I know it's helpful to marry the concept with the experience as
Well,
well.
and vulnerability invites vulnerability, right? When you
Yeah.
do that, not only does that strengthen the connection on one level with the person that you're interacting with, and not only does that make concepts more memorable, but that is also an invitation for someone else to share that
Yeah.
that is welcome, that is a
Yeah.
safe space, and that
Yeah.
reciprocal sharing is ultimately what creates those feelings of closeness and trust and emotional intimacy
Yeah.
in friendships and any kind of relationship. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that, and I hope I can reciprocate in our
You,
conversation today.
you are, don't look now. I'm really curious. Like there's so many things that I've got questions on, like, there's quality and quantity and things, but I
Yeah,
feel um uh the next question is like going to be the thing, right? So no
great.
pressure. I've built this
I'm
up.
ready to hear
Yeah.
it.
Why is it that making and maintaining
Mhm.
friendships as an adult, why is it so hard?
Yes. Yes. Why? Why is it?
Mm,
Well,
my
let
pen
me
is
list off
poised.
yeah. Let me list off a few of the common themes and reasons that come up and that seem to keep coming up. First and foremost, again, I want to depersonalize this. Are there specific traits or ways of being that can make this more difficult? Sure. And we can get into those. But for starters, I am much more interested, and I think our time together and the discourse around this topic is much better spent talking about, again, the kind of structural pieces to this. Because one of the biggest questions I get is, well, making friends is so hard because where are all these so-called friends? Where do I go to meet new people? That answer is not clear, and it's certainly not as clear as it was when we were younger. When we were in school, in elementary years, high school years, college, university, the answer is in my class. The answer is in this extracurricular activity. I know where to go. My next step is very clear. The answer is my parents are arranging play dates for me, and my friend is the person who happens to be right in front of me. My friend happens to be the child of my parents' friends, and that's who I'm spending time with. And then once we leave those social structures like school, it is very difficult to know where to go. Thinking back to our conversation before, the most common place that people make new friends, meet new friends as adults, is work, because to some extent that's functioning in a similar way. Here is a pool of people for you to try and connect with. And because there's opportunities, repeated opportunities for you to interact, and
Yeah.
that idea of repetition, of consistency, of frequency, that is a core part of this, that very few people will meet a friend one time and all of a sudden have that closeness. That can exist, shades of that can exist. And that feeling of, I like you, I want to be friends with you, that's actually something called friendship chemistry. And it's like love at first sight, but in our friendships. So that
Yep.
exists. But even in the presence of friendship chemistry, without those repeated interactions, without those future plans, that's unlikely to be a friendship. That just might be a meaningful conversation that you've shared with somebody one time. So my biggest piece of advice for people who are looking to answer this question of, well, where, is to think about, where are those opportunities in my life right now that will allow me to meet new people and to interact with them regularly. And what does regularly mean? Well, if we're talking about work, potentially that means daily, but it certainly means weekly. There seems to be something to about this early critical period of making friends. And if you can get as much interaction as possible, voluntary interaction, but as much of it as possible within the first 6 weeks to 8 weeks, that seems to be a critical period of time that really allows us to build new friendships. That's not to say that it doesn't sometimes take longer than that, or that you can't take longer than that. But you really want to be thinking about, well, if this is a new activity that I'm trying out, if this is a hobby that I'm pursuing, how can I get as much interaction as possible in those early weeks? And so sign up for some type of an activity that meets regularly,
Mm.
weekly. That's a really helpful way to do it. So that's just one piece of it, of the where. And we can certainly get into that in more detail, but there's all sorts of other pieces to this. Well, what do I say to somebody that I want to be friends with? How do I approach them? What do I do after we've had that nice one-on-one conversation? How do I ask them out on a friend date, right? There's all of this uncertainty, and we don't like uncertainty. And so we try to avoid uncertainty. And so we try to not put ourselves in situations where there will be uncertainty. And that's getting back to that spiral, that downward spiral a little bit. But this is challenging, and this is challenging for so many people. And again, we're not talking about this openly. And so we don't have the information. We feel as though we are the only ones going through this, which is isolating in and of itself.
Yeah.
And it becomes very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember like in our, when we were chatting, when I asked you onto this podcast to share your awesomeness, I think I said something along the lines of, can you come on and share any other ways that not making friends is like weird and awkward and uncomfortable, but we've just got to do it? Mm-hmm. And I think you said, no, that was pretty much it.
Well, there's something freeing in that, because not only do we have this this story that we're telling ourselves about our own, again, competence or capacity, we do this really interesting thing where we put other people on a pedestal too.
Yes.
We think about people around us who seem to have such ease when they're socializing, who give off this energy that people are just attracted to. And we do this with people that we know, people that we admire. And we do this with celebrities, characters from shows or books that we love. And very often what is being portrayed is not reflecting what's going on beneath the surface, is the first thing I'll say. That even if somebody is putting out this aura of competence and wit and comfort, they might not be feeling that in the same way that it reflects on the inside. And the bigger piece is we don't actually need that. It's interesting. I gave a workshop a couple of weeks ago on small talk, the not at all awkward small talk workshop, which was something that I did in collaboration with Wondermind, where I'm on their mental health advisory board. And I talked a lot about this whole idea of small talk superstars, like the people that we just, again, put on this pedestal. And I listed a few of my favorite characters that I associate with that. But the piece is, that's not realistic. We can't do that. That's scripted. And we actually don't want to do that. If you've ever met someone in real life who just has 10 on 10 banter, I mean, you want the 8 on 10 banter, right? You don't want the 10 on 10. That doesn't come across as genuine, and it's not sustainable. And we ultimately are attracted to people who aren't perfect. And so if we can let go of that tendency to put others on a pedestal and assume that we need to rise to that occasion, well, that ends up being very freeing.
I love that. And yeah, you're so right. Like we can't connect with perfect. But ironically, perfection is a mask in many instances. So, my question is like, why is someone so good at doing this? I'm like, I want to get behind there. I want to get behind, which makes it also a little awkward and stuff. But Miriam, I worked in international diplomacy for a long time, and that is the world hotspot of small talk.
Small talk.
Also,
I had a feeling you were going there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also was an I still am an Australian male. And that is, small talk. That's that small talk that never moves beyond small talk, that masquerades as deep talk. And, talk about, like, I grew up in a small community in regional New South Wales. And so it's a farming community. And I have 10 out of 10 weather talk. I can like, oh my God, I can talk about the
It's something
weather.
to behold.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Well,
again on
in full
Olympic level.
disclosure, you did already share a little bit about your upcoming weather today with me, so I got a peek at some of that weather talk before we started
Did.
recording.
I did. I'm good. And that was just an unsubtle, small talk flex. But the other thing there is, live in Canberra, like Australia's capital, and I was in the public service, but so many of my friends are still in the public service. And it's, a political game, and like you need to know what's going on and who's doing what and where and stuff like that. So the small talk becomes like, the political thing, or, and then there's sport, and then there's, whatever else. And then also there's gossip, which
That's an interesting one.
yeah, it is. It feels really good until you're the subject of it. And yeah, I just think that, it's so tempting. I was going to say so many of us, but that's too general, and I don't want to do sort of generalities. But it's so tempting and safe to stay at that small talk, but it's so, overwhelming. And I often equate it to, I speak a few languages, and I speak a few languages really well, as long as they follow the dialogue in like from the exercise in class that we did. I'm like, as soon as they stray from the dialogue, the approved dialogue, I'm out. I was like,
You're looking for the manual.
yeah, I don't know what to say. And it's like, it sort of goes into that discomfort really quickly. But how can we persist with that small talk? And, what are the codes that, can be common? Because I appreciate that these, some of them are deeply cultural. And we do things in different ways in different parts of the world, in different communities. But what are some of the ways that we can go beyond that awkward, weird small talk? And if I could get your answer after this quick break.
Have you ever been with someone, perhaps it's been with your partner, or maybe while you're at work or out with a group of friends, and despite having people around you, you just feel disconnected? And this is an incredibly common experience, one that I've certainly had many times. And when these things happen, we often don't really know what to do about it. Or worse, we think there might be something wrong with us for having that experience in the first place. Hi, this is Pete from the Humans Connecting team. And if you've experienced what I'm talking about, then you might find our Connection Starter course really helpful. See, these feelings, they're all just expressions of loneliness. And before I did the course, I didn't even realise I was lonely. And I certainly didn't see these feelings as an invitation to discover how I can become more connected to myself, more connected to my people, and more connected to the things that I'm most passionate about in my life.
How can we go beyond?
Now, the course itself, it's made up of a series of self-led videos, a comprehensive workbook, and a handful of external resources, all lovingly led and supported by Phil and the team here at Humans Connecting. By the end of it, you'll have your very own personalised connection plan that is specifically tailored to you and your unique connection needs. Look, it's made a huge impact on my life, so if you're curious about improving the connections in yours, jump over to humansconnecting.org and under the products menu, click on the Connection Starter course because you are absolutely worthy of it.
deeper conversations into their relationships, there are other people who go there immediately, right? And it's very difficult to stay in that space of small talk, of chit chat. And it serves an important social function. It kind of warms up that connection. It's a way of testing the waters, of building in and building up a little bit of that familiarity. You are learning little bits of information about the other person through that small talk, some of their quirks, some of their interests, some of their life experiences, and you can pick those back up and you can make judgments about those, not in a critical way, but we're always making judgments about the people we interact with. Do I like you? Do I think that you like me? Do we have the potential to be friends here? What are the areas of our lives that we could share with each other? You're on the lookout for similarities. And I said before that frequency is really important when it comes to building friendships. So too is similarity. That very often what we see is that the starting point for a connection and the starting point for deeper conversations is that point of commonality. And what that thing is will differ for different people in different friendship dyads, which is what we call a group of two people who are involved in a friendship. It might be a life experience. It might be a life challenge. It might be a personal or professional goal. It might be a value or an interest or a hobby. It matters much less what the thing is. What matters is that you are attuned to it and that you are on the lookout for it. And so for me, that's actually one of those inflection points in terms of that shift from small talk to deeper conversations. Can you work to notice those points of similarity, those connection points? And can you steer the conversation towards something that feels especially personal in that way? Now, that doesn't mean personal in terms of exposed or leaving you feeling so vulnerable, at least not right away, but it does feel personal, that you have a vested interest in that topic because you are curious about it and eager to learn more, because you want their input or advice or guidance about it, because you want to share your experience here and have that kind of reciprocal exchange. And so if you can identify what that connection point is, then the shift from small talk to deeper conversations feels much more organic and can happen in a way that feels really rewarding. And so that to me is one of those strategies of look for the points of connection, the points of commonality. I think coming back to what you said before about vulnerability invites vulnerability, right? So if you can find a way to inject little bits of yourself and your experience into your conversation, to model and really signal that you are open to sharing, you are open to talking about other areas of your lives, that ends up being really helpful as well. Because one of the things that often happens is when a friendship begins in one context, work, for example, most of our conversations revolve around work. What are you working on today? How'd you get to work today? How is the traffic? What time do you have to leave work today? Are you picking up your kids today after work? Everything's kind of revolving around that topic. And the more you can broaden out your conversation and pull on other areas of your life, the deeper and more meaningful that one conversation, but also that connection becomes.
Yeah. I feel there's always that again, that degree of awkwardness where you get along really well with someone at work or in that context, and then it's like like outside of work, are we going to get along as well? That's it's like weird and awkward and stuff, but often quite necessary to take that step.
It is. Well, and here is where a little bit of your small talk can actually be very helpful, because as you start to broaden it out and chat about these topics that are kind of orbiting around that initial context, you get clues about this other person, what their schedule is like, what they enjoy, how they spend their time. And that's a really interesting question too to ask. What are you passionate about these days? What do you like to do on your weekends? Those are some of the more personal questions that you can ask as your conversation evolves and your connection evolves. And once you have a little bit of an indication, this is somebody who really enjoys walking in nature. This is somebody who's really passionate about being on the water. This is somebody who has a dog and takes that dog for a walk on the weekends, different hiking trails, whatever that is. You can offer up plans that relate to that little kernel that you have learned about that person. And when you tailor your invites in that way, when you extend an invite to an activity or a gathering that you have a good reason to suspect that that person might be interested in that, that really increases the chances of success that they will say yes. And it can make that initial interaction outside of that first environment a little less awkward.
Yeah, a little less awkward. He's not
Little less.
awkward.
We're not going to erase it. No.
No.
People may be very disappointed that I am unwilling to promise that we will erase all awkwardness. And again, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be absent of awkwardness in order for a connection to unfold. And sitting in that is awkward and uncomfortable, but also human.
Yes, we're all
That's
for
it.
humans here.
That's it. Yeah.
I will share before I ask another question. One of my tips is like acknowledge the awkward.
Yes.
It's like, well, isn't this just like, this is weird, isn't it? Like, this is really, it feels really unnatural. And you, when you give permit, when you call it out, when you like say, there's the dirty big elephant in this room.
Yep.
It's weird and awkward, and I'm feeling weird and awkward. The other person generally goes, yeah, it's weird and awkward. And it's like, great, let's be weird and awkward together. We've given permission for ourselves to like, yep, like we've gotten rid of the awkwardness and by calling it out.
I love that. Yeah, it takes away the power from the awkwardness, right? The other thing that I want to add to that though, actually, is we can also do our could be friends or potential friends a favor in that moment, because the same way that we've been talking all along about how easy it is to personalize experiences, struggles, feelings, our friends, our colleagues are doing the same. Yeah. And in moments of awkwardness, in moments of silence, one of the things that many of us tend to do is to personalize that and assume something like, well, I'm not doing a good enough job navigating this conversation, or wow, we don't have enough to talk about. I guess we're not going to be close, or this person must really not like me that they are answering in these brief, one-word sentences. So we can actually work through that by being very giving and open about what we're feeling. In the same way you're encouraging people to be open about the awkwardness, just put it out there. You can also use it as an opportunity to say something like, yeah, this is awkward, but I have to say, I'm really enjoying getting to know you outside of work. Yeah, this is weird. I didn't know how we'd get along attending this cooking class together, but it's just been really nice to learn more about you and what you're all about. So being giving with our interest in someone else is a great gift, because it reduces, again, that uncertainty. And here's a little tip: we like people who we think like us. And so the more you can signal to the other person that you do like them, you like what you've learned so far, you're enjoying getting to know them, that is going to increase the chances even more that they feel similarly about you. Yeah.
I think that's an outstanding tip. And I think now there's two more. So I was going to ask, what are your top 3 tips for like an adult, for the listener, for the viewer, for me, to make friends and maintain friendships as an adult? So you've given one, so there are another 2.
Sure. Let's see what we can throw out here. So, this is coming to my mind right now because we've talked around this word of openness, right? Just putting it out in the open. It can be very helpful to let the people in your existing social circle know that you are looking to make friends. That very often the people around us have good insight into not only other people that are potentially looking for new connections, but have good insight into who we are and who we may connect with in a real way. And it can feel very vulnerable to do that because, again, we have all sorts of stories that we tell ourselves about how will people respond? What will this look like if I'm asking to be set up on a friend date, so to speak? But people are very receptive to to that question. And it often feels very good to connect somebody with someone else in that way and to make a friendship match, so to speak. So that kind of gets back at this question of how are you meeting new people? But I do think there's something to that, to relying on our existing network, partly so that we can introduce ourselves to new people and expand our network. But we can also think about deepening our existing connections. And
Yes.
we don't always have to reinvent the wheel, and we don't always have to step so far outside of our comfort zone to invite more connection into our lives, that it's easy to assume this is an all or nothing experience. Well, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling isolated, and so I need to change everything that I'm doing. I obviously need to not only peel myself away from this couch and this cozy blanket and my doom scrolling, but I need to put myself in this terrifying situation where I don't know anyone. And yeah, sometimes that might be the case. Sometimes you're ready for that. But if you're not, I invite you to start with, well, who do I have around me? Who do I speak to here and there where I can deepen that connection? And the way to deepen it absolutely is by coming back to this idea of frequency. Can I speak with them a little bit more often? Can I go a little bit deeper into our conversations by sharing a little bit more about what's really going on? Can I invite more vulnerability here? Can I ask them more questions about what's going on in their life? That is something that we often struggle to do for all sorts of reasons, that we don't want to pry. We don't want to pry. It's not my place to ask. I don't know what I'd ask. What if they don't want to share this with me? Well, if they don't want to share with you, then that's up to them to say, I don't want to share it with you. And again, I'm not inviting people to ask very deep personal questions right off the bat with somebody that they don't know. But those questions of, what are you passionate about these days? What's been on your mind? What are you struggling with these days? How can I better support you? Those are connection-centric questions. And it's interesting. It's making me think. So I don't know if we spoke about this, but in the winter, I launched my first course, which is, you'll notice some of the language that I've been saying all along, confidently connected. So it's all about strengthening our social connections and social confidence. And this whole idea of how can we ask better questions was something that kept coming up with clients that I was working with. When I would give workshops on this, people are wondering, what do I say? What do I say to people? How do I ask those connection-centric questions that signal that I'm interested in getting to know you more, that invite vulnerability, but at a level that feels safe or safe enough that it's appropriate, that it feels targeted to that particular connection. And so this ended up being a whole lesson in the course, is exactly this. How are we asking better questions? Because we're not taught how to do this, right? There is no friendship making course. And the skills that we had when we were younger are different than what's needed when we are adults. The kinds of exchanges that we have are different. The expectations that we have to have for our friends and how involved they'll be, and the level of emotional depth that's so valuable is different. So it is a whole area of study, not only in the world of research, but in terms of personal development as well.
It is, wanting to have the answer, the strategy, the way forward, the thing that works. And awesomely and incredibly frustratingly, there's 8 billion people in the world, and each of us have our own peculiarities, our own experiences, our own insights, our own interests, and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of need 8 billion keys at times, but then also there are so many similarities between all of us as humans. We feel connected when we feel seen and when we feel heard.
Yeah.
So see someone as they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like,
be giving with your attention and your presence, right? That is something that we have been conditioned to not give up for all sorts of reasons, many of which have to do with our reliance on our phones and on technology, and just how preoccupied and busy we are, and the demands of living in this world, especially right now. It is very difficult to be with somebody, even if we want to, even if we care about what they're saying and what they're going through. It is very difficult to be present and to not just hear someone, but to communicate that we are seeing them. not just listen, but to really hear and make that actionable. And
Yeah.
I think back to your comment about eye contact. That's why appropriate eye contact is so helpful, because it communicates, I'm not just taking in the information that you're sharing passively. I am really working to listen and to understand. That's why making sure that our phones are nowhere near us is helpful. Not only are we not distracted, that communicates, you are my priority. I really care about what you're saying. That's why small physical gestures like a well-timed hand on the knee or holding a friend's hand when they're in need, if that's one of your kind of love languages in friendship, right? Those things are so powerful. They really communicate, I am here and I care about what you're saying. And I'm empathizing with that. And whether that's a moment of again, struggle, or a moment of uncertainty, or a moment of elation or wondering, it's just that moment of, I'm here in this with you, that is so powerful, and that none of us get enough of.
It is so, like, it's almost intoxicating to feel really present with someone. It's I'm trying to think of a better word than this, but it's special.
It is. It's also incredibly demanding. And so this is also why for, I was going to say for people who are a little bit more introverted, but again, for all of us, we need to be very mindful of, how am I balancing that type of presence with my need for alone time, with my need for rest, with my need for disconnection, because those two things are so related. To be able to connect with, think back to your first pillars, you said connecting with yourself, to be able to connect with other people, we need to be very mindful of how we're also recharging our own social battery and just bodies as well.
Yeah. I think like we got 3 there. And so
I wasn't counting. I'm happy to throw more at you if needed.
No, I was going to go, okay, so that was 1 and 2. I was going to be, the chief counter. But just to summarize there for the viewer and the listener, that's openness. So being open to connection and being a place. I think Francis Weller says, being a place of welcome. We look for places where we want to be welcomed, but we need to realize that we need to be a place of welcome as well. I've just completely massacred his awesome quote there, but and then to look for ways of deepening established contacts. So it doesn't have to be this my words here, like a shopping spree of collecting new people. But it can be a deepening of established connections, and then being giving with your time and attention, because that does make us feel special. And Miriam, as you and I were talking about it, like before we press play, connection takes time. And the words that you've said before, about frequency. So I would add to frequency intention. Like, we need to set an intention to actually, this is important. Connection is important. I'm looking for ways that I can choose connection. And then once you've gone, okay, this is now important in my day. I'm going to be looking for ways of finding connection, of deepening connections, of being present and being giving. And I'm going to help me with that, I'm going to leave the phone at home, or turn off. This is my issue right now. Turn off notifications on my watch, which send that little haptic of like that take me out of that moment. And so there's some really, really great tips and suggestions there. Not easy to do, but simple to keep in mind, that because it can be really overwhelming. And those kind of simple tips can have hooks that can stick with us. There's one thing that I really wanted to come back to, and it was that concept of letting go. Like, when a friendship has run its course, and it's time to let go. And I'm just thinking, I want to come back to this, and I'm mindful of time, but I really wanted to come back to this because when we're experiencing loneliness and we're looking around and there's people who may have been around us for a very long time, but we haven't really felt that we could be seen. We don't feel that we belong there, and we don't feel seen, and we don't feel heard there. But there may be family, there might be friends who we've been friends with forever, but we've not been telling them, like we haven't felt that we could be ourselves around them. And in the midst of a loneliness experience, which we all experience, of course, from time to time, as we're meant to as humans, it can be two things I find can happen. One is that we can be so I'm resisting using the word desperate, because but I want to say that's coming without judgment.
Hungry.
And I'm hungry. That's beautiful. And I'm sort of drawing on my own experience here. Like hungry to feel seen and feel heard, that I had been in a place where I was kind of in the supermarket of life, shopping while hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And walking around the aisles with my trolley, and it's like going, oh yes, yes, and leaving with a heaving trolley full of connections.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in such a rush, not such a rush, but essentially like I could, and this is very graphic, so please forgive me, but essentially like. I'm trying to avoid the graphic nature of it, but it's like I call it like vomiting my loneliness on people.
Mm-hmm.
And using that as a way, kind of in a similar way to gossip, to hack connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And using my story to hack connection, and generally that kind of the friendships there were not enduring. Because like people like wanted to help and support and all that kind of stuff, but like they weren't invested. They were just, it was in a nice way, but out of pity. Or people were so repelled, which further like aided the spiral down. Like, oh God, I'm putting myself out there, and people are withdrawing even further. How much of a piece of shit am I?
Oh, it feels terrible. It feels
Right.
terrible. Yeah.
Then, so there's that part, and I feel that there's a whole huge conversation in there with you on that. And like I don't really want to bookmark that for a future chat. But what I want to sort of get to is on that letting go. And when we're experiencing loneliness and it feels like there's an absolute paucity of those quality connections, not even quality connections, but the quantity of connections, the whole idea of letting people go can be absolutely terrifying.
Yes. Yeah.
Relationships run their course. And we see this all the time in romantic relationships. All the time in romantic relationships. I'm staying here because if I'm not here, I'll be alone and lonely.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like,
absolutely.
Don't look now. Here's an uncomfortable truth for you. You're not alone, but you're still lonely. Your strategy isn't working out for you. So, you might be alone at the end of that romantic relationship, but you might not actually be lonely anymore.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
well, this is
in a similar way for
exactly
friendship.
it, right? That yes, absolutely. That loneliness is not aloneness, and I will often come back to this, that feeling lonely in a crowded room of people is one of the most painful versions of loneliness that exists. And if we look at the research on this topic as well, there's good evidence that staying in friendships that are, and I want to make it known to anyone listening that I'm using air quotes here because I have all sorts of very strong feelings about this word, but I do think that it's used a lot in this context, friendships that are toxic, which I think really just implies that they are having a detrimental effect on our well-being. Let's call it that. Friendships that are unhealthy in some way, friendships that are one-sided, consistently draining, even friendships that are ambivalent, meaning there's a part of you that wants to be in this connection or is benefiting from it, and there is a whole other part of you that is absolutely not. Think of the friend who's treating you hot and cold. You never know exactly what you're going to get. There's a part of you that kind of appreciates your past, but what's happening in the present just is not aligned with who you are or where you want to go. That staying in those types of friendships not only increases feelings of loneliness, but has a detrimental effect on our physical health and on our mental well-being. And so there is a cost to staying in those relationships. Now, again, I'm not advocating that the solution to friendship challenges or feelings of loneliness is to simply cut and run. But I do think that very often, far too often, we hold on to friendships because of this narrative, the fear of being alone, the idea that we will never be able to find that closeness, maybe that we once had with that person in someone else, that it's too late. That tends to be one of the really common stories that I hear. Again, thinking back to the difference between childhood friendships and adult friendships, that I should stay connected to people that I've known for my whole life, that I have to, that I'm doing something morally wrong if I let go of this connection. And that storytelling piece is just so fascinating to me, especially as a psychologist, because it's that connection between thought, feeling, and behavior. And yes, it keeps us stuck in relationships and friendships in particular, that are just really not serving us. And we want our friendships to bring it full circle, rooted in choice, not duty or obligation.
Yeah. There's nothing fun about, obligation. And, those relationships that we had at school, like with friends, and, we're in our 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still talking about things that happened when we were 14. And I will just share this. I don't have many people in my life who have known me for very long. So a consequence of moving around place to place to place over the last sort of 20, 25 years. And as a result of some media work that happened over a few years ago, someone from my past who I went to school with, like we've known each other since we were 16 and boarding school together. And then we lived at the same college at uni together. He did a different degree and I did it than I did. But he saw me and we hadn't connected for about 35 years in between times. Maybe a little shorter time, but for a very long time in between times. And he'd been living in Asia and I'd been living in Asia, and he had 3 kids, I have 2 kids, and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, he saw me and he connected. And just this past Monday, I was in Sydney, and he's in the team now of Humans Connecting. He's our finance guy and helping with sources of funding and things like that. But anyway, we reconnected and we were just meant to have a chat for an hour. It turned out like a 4-hour chat. We were just this came up, and I just wanted to share this. Like, it's important to allow those kind of friendships to evolve. And it would have been a very easy trap to fall into. It's like, do you remember when we were 16 and then this happened in this class? And then you just keep on retelling and dining out on that story for the rest of your life. That can be characteristic of so many friendships. Mm-hmm. But it was just, we both commented, it was beautiful. It was beautiful how it was like we were seeing each other with that history, but seeing each other as we are now.
Yeah, I love that. I so resonate with that. And that past piece, I mean, nostalgia is so seductive,
Yes.
so comforting, often,
Yeah.
and so easy to fall into. And again, it serves a purpose. It is comforting. It does feel good. I had my 20-year high school reunion a couple of weeks back. Surprise, surprise to no one. Probably I was the one planning it. And being able to reconnect and reminisce together was wonderful. And when we are looking to, whether it's build new friendships or reconnect with a long lost friend, that might be that starting point, might serve a similar function as the small talk that we were talking about before. And it might punctuate our conversations throughout that connection and the evolution of that connection. But without a focus on the present, there isn't going to be a future. Oh,
No,
I
I'm
lost you all of a
whispering.
sudden. There you are.
Yeah, no, I was letting that sink in for dramatic effect.
Oh,
You know,
sorry, I've ruined
yeah,
it.
yeah. No,
I'm so sorry.
just gonna like, well, this has been great, Miriam. Thanks, but it's now ruined. And no, it's so true. It's so true, and I think it's really. I just want to say how hard this can be because it is we know potentially we know innately how important this is for us, and we don't want to get it wrong. We don't, we want to be accepted. We want to be seen for who we are in that moment. And it's such a minefield, and but it's worth it because we're worth it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think we've gotten much further than it's weird and awkward, but we really need to do it anyway.
I think that's the high level message here, yeah, it's weird, it's awkward. Don't expect it to not be. Sometimes it isn't, and that's great. But those feelings of awkwardness at the beginning, they're certainly not a sign that you were going about this in the wrong way. And they're not a sign about that friendship potential, that there are plenty of very close friendships that have come out of those moments of awkwardness, of those pauses that went on a little bit longer than we would like, of the time that it took to get to know who are you and what are our points of similarity, what are those connection points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, final surprise question.
Sure.
What's one piece of advice that you can give to someone now who is experiencing loneliness?
Oh, let me think of something that feels potentially resonant. Oh, I hate sticking to one thing here. That I'm not one for ultimates or absolutes. But here's what comes up for me. So I am a big fan of self-compassion work, and a big part of self-compassion is speaking to ourselves the way that we would speak to a close friend, the way that we wish our close friends would speak to us. And so we can do all sorts of interesting things when we lean into this work. We can ask ourselves questions like, what do I wish a friend would say to me in this moment? What is it that I need to hear? What would I say to a friend who came up to me and said that they were feeling lonely? And through those kinds of questions, thinking about nostalgia, you can even ask yourself, what would I say to a past me, a younger version of me who was feeling lonely back in high school? You'd be surprised at the kinds of supportive messages that you were able to generate when you just shift the lens through which you're looking at your own human experience. And very often we try and motivate ourselves through criticism. Well, you're not doing enough. You need to work harder. Well, there's something wrong with you. If only you just change this thing about yourself, then maybe you'll find connection with other people. Then you'll find the friendships that you're really looking for, that you deserve. And I always come back to this, that criticism is not an effective motivator for change, not in the way that we assume it to be, not in the way that we practice it. Self-compassion is far more effective. And you used the word neutrality earlier. And I just think that's so powerful, because when we hear self-compassion, we tend to assume that this is fluffy, this is phony, this is fake, this is toxic positivity. And I am not using air quotes here, because that type of positivity truly is toxic when we force that upon ourselves. But why is it that we think that the excessively critical version of that is truer? If we can shift, at least for starters, to that place of neutrality, well, I'm not perfect. I'm not amazing, but can I be okay? Can I be just okay at this friendship thing for now? Can I be just okay at this small talk thing for now? That is often, again, that little nudge that encourages action. And all of this, all we need to think about are those little moments, those little actions that we can take to just bring new people into our lives, or new moments of connection. And so start small, whether that is about how you talk to yourself, or going out there and practicing these kind of micro interactions, these micro moments of connection, by having brief exchanges with the barista at your coffee shop, by smiling at somebody on your morning commute that you see every morning, by having a little bit of small talk with a parent at school pickup. That there's a lot of value in those small moments in and of themselves. And that's often the thing that gets you enough practice that you can feel comfortable doing the bigger things.
I love that. I love that.
I don't
I've
think
got
that was one thing. I told you I wouldn't be able to stick to it.
That's one fire hose of awesome. I'm like having a full body response to that. Like there are like, I think in front of my kneecaps like are tingling right now. Like that is such profound advice that I'm taking on board within myself as well. And this is something that I've been really working on for the last little while is, I'm not allowing to sit in negative, this sounds very, very hippie, but sitting in negative energy for too long. Like in the terms of like complaints. But it is something that I can like allow myself to wallow in my own for a very long time. And what I've been noticing is my tolerance for those own kind of critical and gossipy and snarky voices externally is reducing. Got very little time for that now. And I also have very little time for it in myself now. I acknowledge it. I'm like, oh, wow, I just, to quote Tom York in Radiohead, for a moment there, I lost myself from the song Karma Police. But yeah, it's like, oh, wow, maybe, yeah. And as you've just said, like it is that cultivating, some self-kindness. And it's like, oh, wow, I lost myself there for a moment, but I'm back.
Yeah.
And it's not denying the bad, because that is like that relentless positivity is like denial is not a helpful state to be in for too long. But yeah, Miriam, that's just beautiful. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind why you are such an in-demand commentator on friendship and speaker on friendship. It is such a joy to witness how you are putting you into the world. And I'm a huge fan of yours on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and all of the things. I just think what you're doing and the insight that you bring, it's special. And I just want to say thank you for following that curiosity.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that curiosity in me. I appreciate that. And likewise, you're doing such important work in this space, and you're creating a space for such important conversations. So thank you for working to, again, normalize the human experience and the kinds of experiences that far too few of us talk openly about.
Yeah. Not doing it doesn't work. So how about we give it a go? So before you jump off, how can people become massive groupies like I am and huge fans of you and your work, just in case they're not familiar? How can they find you?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So you hit on a few of the big ways. On social media, I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. My name, Miriam Kirmayer. I would definitely invite people to check out my website, miriamkirmayer.com, because I have lots of free resources there. That is a great place to start diving into podcast conversations and articles that I've written and interviews that I've done on the subject. And one of the big things that I'll kind of point people toward if they're interested in something that's really actionable and tangible is you can sign up for a free guide that I have, 5 ways to create connections that count. And that will really walk you through 5 clear actionable steps for inviting new friendships and connections into your life. And it includes some of this mindset work that we spoke about, and also just practical strategies to build this into your daily routine, which is easier said than done. So that is a great place to start. And I'm always happy to continue the conversation afterwards. So please feel free to reach out and let me know what this conversation has sparked in you.
Yes. I'll be putting links in the episode description to all of those as well, and for your website for people to find that free guide. But Dr. Miriam Kirmayer, just thank you so much for spending time in your evening.
Yeah, people have probably seen the sky outside fade
the
from
slow fade of a summer sunset.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just been, well, I'm going to say this on behalf of the listener and the viewer, but my soul certainly feels very nourished for having spent time having a chat with you, and I hope that the viewer and listener feel the same way. And just thank you so much for being so free with your awesomeness today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
How are you going after that conversation? Wasn't that just so, I don't know. I meant it when just before that I said that my soul felt full. It felt very nourished. And I'm just so extremely grateful to Dr. Miriam Kirmayer for being so generous with her time, her insights. I didn't mention this in the intro, but her work has featured in all sorts of places, like in the Atlantic, the New York Times, Time Magazine, the morning talk shows in the United States. So yeah, like her wisdom, her insight is extremely valuable, and it was such a joy to give this to provide that for you. And we just want to say thank you on behalf of all the Humans Connecting team for joining me for this episode. And as always, we would really love to hear what you think about it, so what you've thought of it. And so please feel free to comment on YouTube or through our social channels. And be sure to check out our website, humansconnecting.org, for details about how we at Humans Connecting can help you, your workplace, and the communities thrive through loneliness and get the connection that we each need and deserve. And finally, we are here to make a positive social impact. We're driven by a need to make a positive social impact. So if you're a business and are looking for ways to support humans to feel more connected, and you also want to have a positive social impact, check the link in the episode description to partner with us. And that could be through advertising on future episodes of this podcast or collaborating with us in other ways. That's it for this episode. It's time for you to go on with the rest of your day being awesome and looking for ways where you can show up to be the awesome human that you are, to allow other humans in, and for you to see humans as they are, as well as you build and create and maintain friendships. Thanks again for joining us. We can't wait to see you in the next episode. We're really excited to see you in the next episode. And until then, be present, allow people to see you and you see people as they are, and you'll be well on your way to being a well-connected, awesome human. We'll see you next time.